Imagine for a moment that everything you struggle with, every fear, every insecurity, every emotional wound, every part of yourself you secretly wish you could erase, is not actually the problem. What if it is the map? What if the traits you hide from the world are not obstacles standing in the way of your purpose, but clues leading directly toward it? Most people spend their entire lives trying to become better by cutting away the parts of themselves they dislike. They suppress anger, hide insecurity, deny jealousy, ignore fear, bury painful desires, silence emotional truth, and slowly, they become strangers to themselves. Carl Jung believed this is one of the greatest tragedies of modern life. Because according to Jung, the parts of yourself you reject do not disappear. They go underground, into what he called the shadow. The shadow is the hidden side of your personality. The unconscious container holding everything you were taught was unacceptable. The emotions you suppress, the desires you deny, the traits you learn to hide to gain love, approval, and acceptance. But here is the shocking part. Jung did not believe the shadow was evil. He believed it contained enormous power. Your creativity, your passion, your authenticity, your individuality, even your purpose, all buried beneath the parts of yourself you are afraid to face. And the longer you run from the shadow, the more power it gains over your life. Think about how often people say things like, "I don't know who I really am. I feel disconnected from myself. I feel empty even when life looks successful. Something inside me feels trapped." Jung believed this happens because people spend years building a persona while abandoning the self. The persona is the mask you wear for society. The version of yourself designed to fit in, to be accepted, to be admired, to avoid rejection. But every mask has a cost. Because every time you suppress a real emotion, every time you deny an authentic desire, every time you hide a part of yourself to appear acceptable, a piece of your shadow grows stronger. And eventually, the hidden parts begin demanding attention. Not softly, but through emotional pain, through anxiety, through projection, through conflict, through self-sabotage, through recurring patterns you cannot seem to escape. Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That sentence alone explains more about human psychology than most people realize. Because the people who trigger you the most are often mirrors. Not mirrors of your conscious personality, but mirrors of your shadow. Think about someone who deeply irritates you. Maybe they seem arrogant, selfish, emotional, attention-seeking, weak, controlling. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Why does their behavior affect you so strongly? Because usually, emotional intensity points toward unconscious material. For example, a person who hates arrogance may secretly suppress their own confidence. Someone who criticizes emotional people may be terrified of their own emotions. Someone obsessed with controlling others may secretly feel powerless inside. This is called projection. Projection happens when we unconsciously place rejected parts of ourselves onto other people. And most people never realize they are doing it. They spend their lives fighting reflections instead of understanding the source. But Jung believed projection is not punishment. It is invitation, because every trigger reveals something hidden inside you waiting to be understood. And this is where shadow work begins. Not with perfection, not with positivity, but with honesty, radical honesty, the willingness to sit quietly and admit, yes, I feel envy. Yes, I crave recognition. Yes, I carry anger. Yes, I feel fear. Yes, there are parts of me I hide from everyone. Most people avoid this because they believe acknowledging darkness makes them bad. Jung believed the opposite. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is the real path to transformation. Not pretending to be pure, not performing spirituality, not building a fake image of perfection, but becoming whole. And wholeness requires integration. This is why nearly every great mythological story follows the same pattern. The hero must descend into darkness before transformation becomes possible. Hercules had to confront his rage. Luke Skywalker had to face the darkness inside himself. Batman literally becomes powerful by entering the darkness he fears. These are not just stories. They are psychological maps. Because every human being eventually faces the same choice. Continue running from the shadow. Or turn around and face it. And here is what most people do not understand. The shadow does not only contain darkness. It also contains buried light. Many people suppress not only pain, but power. A child who was mocked for being expressive suppresses creativity. A teenager punished for confidence suppresses leadership. A sensitive person learns to numb emotion to survive. Over time, the personality becomes smaller and safer, but also emptier, and eventually, the soul begins demanding expansion again. This is why so many people feel deeply unfulfilled even when life appears successful externally. Because success without authenticity creates inner fragmentation. You can build an impressive life while abandoning yourself internally. And the psyche always knows. Jung believed the process of reclaiming these hidden parts leads to something called individuation. Individuation is the journey of becoming your true self. Not your persona, not your social identity, not the version built for approval, but your complete self, light and dark integrated together. This is not easy work. Because the moment you stop running from the shadow, you begin seeing yourself clearly. And clarity can be uncomfortable. You begin noticing patterns in relationships, emotional triggers, repeated fears, hidden desires, unresolved wounds. You start realizing that many of your behaviors were survival strategies, not authentic expressions of who you are. And yet, this awareness is freedom, because unconscious patterns only control you while they remain unconscious. The moment you see them clearly, transformation begins. So how do you actually work with the shadow? Jung proposed several methods. The first is simple observation. Pay attention to emotional reactions that feel disproportionately strong. Ask yourself, why does this upset me so much? What part of myself feels threatened here? What am I refusing to acknowledge? This alone can reveal extraordinary things. The second practice is journaling. Jung believed writing creates a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. Write honestly about fears, dreams, fantasies, recurring thoughts, emotional triggers. Patterns begin emerging, and those patterns often reveal the hidden architecture of your shadow. Another powerful tool is dream analysis. Jung believed dreams are messages from the unconscious. Your mind speaks symbolically during sleep. Recurring dreams, dark figures, chases, falling, hidden rooms. These are often symbolic representations of rejected parts of yourself trying to enter awareness. The unconscious constantly attempts communication. Most people simply never learn how to listen. Jung also encouraged something called dialogue with the shadow. This sounds strange at first, but it is profoundly powerful. Imagine sitting across from the part of yourself you fear most, and asking, what are you trying to protect me from? Why did you appear? What do you need me to understand? You might discover that anger was protecting pain. That perfectionism was protecting insecurity. That emotional numbness was protecting vulnerability. Suddenly, the shadow stops looking evil and starts looking wounded. That changes everything, because healing becomes possible the moment understanding replaces shame. And this transformation deeply affects relationships too. Jung believed relationships act as mirrors reflecting unconscious material back to us. This is why people often repeat the same relationship patterns over and over. Different faces, same emotional dynamics, because unresolved shadow material keeps recreating familiar pain until it is acknowledged consciously. But once you begin integrating the shadow, relationships change. You stop expecting other people to complete you emotionally. You stop projecting unconscious wounds onto others. You communicate more honestly. You become less reactive, more grounded, more authentic, and perhaps most importantly, you stop fearing vulnerability. Because vulnerability is no longer weakness. It becomes truth, and truth creates intimacy. Now here is where shadow work becomes even more powerful. Jung believed the shadow contains enormous creative energy. The energy used to suppress parts of yourself does not disappear. It becomes trapped. And trapped energy often transforms into anxiety, depression, frustration, or emotional exhaustion. But when integrated consciously, that same energy becomes fuel. This is why so many great artists, leaders, and visionaries transformed suffering into meaning. Frida Kahlo turned pain into art. Martin Luther King Jr. transformed anger into justice. Writers turn loneliness into literature. Musicians turn heartbreak into music. The shadow becomes wisdom when consciously integrated. And often, your deepest wounds point directly toward your deepest purpose. The person who struggled with rejection becomes a healer. The person who felt unseen helps others feel valued. The person who suffered emotionally develops profound empathy. Your wounds are not always barriers. Sometimes they are preparation. And this leads to Jung's most important insight of all. Integrating the shadow does not just transform the individual. It transforms humanity itself. Because people who reject their shadow unconsciously project it onto the world. This is where hatred, division, and cruelty often begin. Humans fear in others what they refuse to face within themselves. But when a person confronts their own darkness consciously, they become more compassionate, more understanding, more human. They stop needing perfection from themselves and others. And that creates peace internally and externally. Imagine a world where more people took responsibility for their shadow instead of projecting it onto everyone around them. Conflicts would change, relationships would deepen, human consciousness itself would evolve. This is why Jung saw shadow work not just as personal healing, but as collective healing. So if you take anything from this journey, let it be this. The goal of life is not perfection. It is wholeness. Not becoming pure light, but becoming conscious enough to integrate both light and darkness. Because the parts of yourself you fear most may contain the exact wisdom, creativity, strength, and purpose you have been searching for your entire life. So tonight, instead of asking, how do I destroy my darkness? Ask a different question. What is my darkness trying to teach me? That question alone could change your life forever.